How's it going, everybody? I'm Bex from RJ Leather Studio. It's lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for signing up to this course. I have been in the fashion industry for quite a few years now. I think I've clocked about 20 years. And when I first started, I did a BA in fashion design and ended up working in numerous different fashion houses in Europe and in the UK. And I've got so much knowledge that I'd really like to share with you. I absolutely adore handbags. I've always thought of them as being like mini little sculptures, because the beauty of leather is you can really get like fantastic silhouettes with them, and there's so many different shapes and styles. I started my company back in 2008 with my own handbag range, and I'd always had a real passion for upcycling. The beauty of existing garments is there's already so many lovely fine details in those garments that you can almost utilise for your new design. So we're going to teach you sort of ways to kind of utilise the pre-existing details in some of the previous garments and actually make them all into your own designs. So now we're going to be talking about all the different materials and tools you're going to need for this course. I'm so excited about this course. I feel like it's kind of bringing me back to my roots of bag making. There's so many professional techniques that we're going to be teaching you during this course. But the idea of it is really that I want to introduce you to how simple bag making can be. I remember right at the beginning when I first started my journey, you kind of thought that leather was really expensive, you weren't quite sure where to start. So this whole course is all about trying to utilise what you might have in your home, and we're going to be doing quite a bit of upcycling as well. If any of you do have scraps of like new leather, that's brilliant to use as well, because we're going to be doing quite small pattern pieces. So you should be able to kind of utilise bits that are new or old or upcycled, and we're going to go through all those details now. So if you kind of like look around your house for all these things, I'm going to give you some alternatives as well. So you will definitely need your domestic sewing machine, which ideally you'll have a Teflon foot, which is a lovely foot that you use for sort of sewing leather because it glides over the surface of the leather. But actually what we're doing in this course quite a lot is sewing on the inside, so like the underneath of the leather. So it's not as important to have a Teflon. You could always use your metal foot if that's what you've got. And then I definitely recommend using a leather point needle. And we do supply these, both the Teflon feet and the needles. So if any of you are sort of struggling to source them or find them, we can always post you one of those. So you've got your domestic sewing machine, your Teflon foot, your needle, and then we also need some thread. Now, I really like using polyester thread, so if you can kind of dig around your sewing box, see whether you've got any polyester thread, that would be brilliant. And then we'll be doing a little bit of ironing, and what we're going to use as our pattern is actually A4 paper. So again, just trying to make it as easy as possible for you. We'll talk through how we're actually going to combine it all, but you're just going to grab 11 pieces of A4 paper if you can. And then what we're going to be doing is quite a lot of drawing initially onto the paper to start building up your pattern. And I absolutely love using these. They're called Pattern Masters, obviously like see-through plastic, and it's got different lines at the bottom here. So later on I'll show you what we might use those for. But again, if you don't have one of those, a metal ruler is absolutely brilliant as well. Ideally metal when we're cutting the leather, and plastic when we're doing the pattern cutting. So if anything, the metal one's the most important one, I'd say. And then you're going to need something to draw. So we're going to be scoring onto the leather or drawing onto the leather. So an awl, which again might be something that you just have lying around in your tool shed or something. It's called a scratch awl. So it's absolutely brilliant for sort of scoring onto the leather. Or if you don't have it, alternatively a biro is really good as well. And we'll need the biro when we're doing the pattern cutting, so we'll show you that. And then of course all of your cutting tools as well. So you should hopefully all have a pair of scissors lying around the house. A big one's great, or if you've got any of the little ones as well, they might come in really handy a bit later on, because we're going to be cutting out small little circles a bit later. And actually what I utilise for drawing the circle is just a tiny little coin. If any of you got one of those to hand, we're just going to draw around it and then we cut with a little pair of scissors. But if you don't have those kind of bits and bobs, you might have a craft tool, which is either a cutting knife or a little, like craft knife one. So again, they can be utilised for cutting. And you know, it's totally up to you. With tools, I think some people prefer scissors, some people prefer knives. So just go with whatever sort of suits you best. And then everyone loves this and a bit of handbag making. We do loads of gluing. So although we'll be sewing most of the bag obviously all together, there's quite a lot of gluing the seams flat, and Copydex glue is amazing for doing that. So if you could source it, most of the time you could find it in a hardware shop or, you know, WH Smith, places like that. They do tend to stock it, possibly in smaller bottles, but that would be absolutely brilliant if you could find that. Another option, if you can't find the Copydex, is double-sided tape, because that really comes in handy as well. And again, the narrow, if you could get hold of that rather than the wider ones, but you can always trim it down narrower if you need. And then we'll be doing a bit of pinning. So if you've got some pins to hand, that's relevant when we're putting the pattern together. And then these wonderful things called quilting clips, they're really good for holding the leather together, because really when you're pinning the fabric, that's great, but if you pin leather, you're going to really hurt your fingers. So if any of you have got these little quilting clips to hand, then they're brilliant with leather. But again, alternatively, you could always use like a bulldog clip, things like that. So hopefully that's all some basic-ish tools, and we're now going to talk through all the materials you're going to need. So here comes the really fun bit. We're going to talk about all the materials you're going to need to make this bag. So we're going to be sourcing leather garments. Now, they come in all different shapes and sizes, and I would ideally say you're wanting to go bigger the better. You're probably going to need about 2 garments to make this. So this, for example, is a large men's jacket and could be really well utilised in this, like to make this bag. So at least 2 of them about this size. And you want to think about the really nice little details that are already in the jacket that you might be able to utilise for your bag. So for example here, that's got a really nice welt pocket. That could be gorgeous on your bag. So look for those nice little details. And you don't necessarily want a garment that's got too many seams in as well, because we're going to try and minimise the bulk when it comes to sewing leather on the domestic machines. And do remember that the ideal is quite thin as well, so maybe about 1 millimetre thick for your leather. So if any of you find like the really old heavy sort of biker jackets, they're probably not quite right for this project. So look for trousers, look for jackets, look for coats, whatever you can get your hands on really. And obviously, you know, depending on colours that you like as well, look for brighter colours if you like a bright leather colour. In terms of size, what we're going to be doing is we want 13 of these A4 size pieces of pattern paper to cut out to make this bag. So you've got to think as well in terms of when you sort of place the pattern onto the jacket, what might be best for you to sort of incorporate. So it might even help if you're sort of going out to a charity shop or something to source it, to grab yourself your A4 paper and think about how it might work into your bag. So that's the leather. And then we will be lining this bag. So it's going to be a fully turned, seamed, lined bag. And I really like using curtains for my linings when I'm upcycling. You could use upholstery fabrics. Think about something that's got quite a nice weight to it. So sort of a medium to heavy weight, I'd say. And think about as well, I absolutely love cottons because they're so well behaved in terms of sewing. So if any of you are quite new to sewing, I'd say definitely go for cottons. And then this is optional, but I really adore using this iron-on interfacing to stiffen the leather. It's only a minimal amount that we'll need for this bag. So if any of you have got sort of a sewing shop nearby and you might be able to get some heavyweight iron-on fusing, then that would be absolutely brilliant. But I am going to show you an alternative during the making, so don't worry if you can't source that. And now we're going to show you our little fun shopping trip that we did to Emmaus in Portslade. And here is our lovely jackets that we found. So during this course, we're actually going to be doing a soft leather handle for your bag, but you could always think about different ways to experiment with using perhaps like belts as the handles. So this could be like a really nice detail. It's obviously the thicker leather, so you've got to sort of consider whether your machine's definitely going to be able to tackle going through it, but you could always rivet them on, and a lovely belt like that could be cut in half, taper the ends off, and that makes a really, really nice strap or handle for your bag. So I've decided to go with this lovely suede one to bring in a little bit of colour and a bit of texture as well, because suede's nice for having that slightly sort of softer feel. So we're going to go with that one. And then the other one we've decided to go for is this, because it's got those lovely tucks that I mentioned earlier, and it's also got these lovely kind of patterned effect as well, so that'll be great to incorporate into some of the panels. And another thing that I really like about it is it's got some quite nice simple pockets, so you could actually use the pocket within the panels of the bag and you've already got a pre-made pocket then. So those two are winners. So that was such a fun shopping trip. It really is my like heaven going in those places. So these are the lovely jackets that we sourced. Your lovely black one, and then this kind of like teal suede. I think that's going to be really nice combo together. So what we start with is trying to kind of dissect the jacket and lay it out as flat as possible. But don't worry, we're not necessarily going to unpick every single stitch. Really, it's all about just doing it quite quickly with a pair of scissors. So to start with, your sleeves, we're just going to be cutting through the leather only. Try not to go into the lining at all yet. And you're just going to go all the way around the sleeve head. So you kind of basically start to take it apart. So cut as close to the seam as possible as well, because you just don't want to kind of waste any of the leather. And really, this is the bit where it's kind of like your brain is starting to think about different ways that your specific jacket could be utilised. So depending on whether it's a jacket or whether you've ended up choosing trousers, the idea is we're trying to lay these bits of leather as flat as possible so you can get your A4 pattern pieces out of it. But do sort of think individually as well for your own project, because this is all about you becoming a bag designer and really utilising leather jackets or existing things. It's just really good fun because there's so many different ways that you can do it. Even if you still use the same shape bag, every time you make it, when you've made it in a upcycled leather, it looks different every time. So it's brilliant. So that's my first sleeve done. Also slash through this center, which is basically just under the sleeve. So all the way up there. So you'll repeat exactly the same thing on the other side. So you've got both sleeves off. And then what I want you to next do is take off the collar. So this one is quite a large collar. And again, I'm going to go right up to that seam. So once you've taken the collar off, the next stage is to go down the shoulder seam. And then you'll notice suddenly it all lays really flat, ready for you to start actually planning out where you're going to put your panels. And then just across that shoulder as well, I want you to do it. And there is some absolutely gorgeous details in this one. I love all these tucks that you've got at the top. And again, really lovely shaped pockets. So I'm definitely going to be utilising the pockets in our bag. And just really carefully go along the very edge facing and just get rid of all that grotty old lining. And you probably want to check the pockets as well, because every now and again you might find that there's a nice pound in the bottom or snotty tissues. So get rid of the snotty tissues. So you end up with this really lovely flat piece of leather to start working with. So now I'm going to work on the suede one in exactly the same way. So I'm just going all the way around the sleeve head again. And most of the time this is the same principle, regardless of whether it's like an 80s batwing jacket and it's got like a kind of raglan sleeve. Just try and take the sleeve off as best you can. And I'm just going to cut, that's the lining of the sleeve arm again. I'm just going to cut through that. And then on this jacket, there's actually two different seams here. So it doesn't really matter which one you go for, but I'm going to go through this inner one that's a bit shorter so that it allows me a little bit more length there. And this one here, actually, what you've got is the buttonholes. So I'm going to have to go just inside of that on the inside. So come all the way down here. And there might be sort of marks on the jackets that you want to avoid as well. You're trying to sort of use the most pristine areas. And there we are. I'll also take the lining out, but we'll show you the next stage after this.